Hey, thanks for coming. Welcome to the Love Shack.
Hey, welcome to the Love Shack, a little old place where we can get together and explore fresh perspectives, eavesdrop on juicy conversations, and uncover mysteries that nobody talks about, but absolutely influence our relationships. If you're struggling in your marriage, just starting out in a new relationship, or are single and looking to do better next time, this is the show for you. My name is Stacey Bartley, and I'm here with my co-host and lover, Tom. Together for the past decade, we've been teaching and loving on people from around the world with the sole purpose of helping individuals and couples to love more and fear less in their relationships, both with themselves and others. There's a quick shout out to our podcast listeners too, by the way. The Love Shack airs live Thursday at 1 p.m. PST and 1150 KKNW. I bring this up in case you ever find yourself wanting to ask us a question or share with us live. So wherever you are right now,
you bet. Thanks so much for listening. Yeah, whether you're live or you're catching us on the podcast, we appreciate you spending some time with us. We have an outstanding guest that we're really excited to share with you today.
Don't give it away.
Not yet. Not yet.
Yes, today on our show, we're going to be joined by Trevor Blake. He's a serial entrepreneur who has sold his first company for $100 million and went on to do it several more times, taking him into billionaire status. Now, that's good news for sure. But it gets even better, in our opinion, because Trevor didn't sacrifice his relationships with his beloved wife or his personal health and well-being to achieve his success in business. How was he able to maintain such a life balance while creating financial freedom, you ask? Well, guess what, you guys? You're in for a treat because we have the master himself in the Love Shack with us right now. We'll be right back in a minute.
Do you feel like your love life is on life support? It's time for a turbocharged relationship resuscitation. With an alternative to marriage counseling, head over to staceybartley.com to learn more about their proprietary programs their clients use to save their relationships. staceybartley.com. Visit staceybartley.com today.
Ready to learn the most important thing you can do to revitalize your relationship today? Go to staceybartley.com/fairydust. staceybartley.com/fairydust. This is the number one thing Stacey teaches her VIP clients that has the power to improve the health of your relationship today. Learn how sprinkling a little fairy dust in your relationship can stop arguments in their tracks, rekindle your spark, and take your difficult conversations from the struggle bus to easy street.
Are you tired of sitting on a couple's counselor's couch and feeling like you're just rehashing the past and making no progress? Do you feel like you're holding on to your relationship but panicked you're losing your partner? It's time to learn how to deepen your connection, finally resolve the arguments that keep coming up, understand yourself and your partner, and create the level of intimacy you've been dreaming of. It's time for love to tingle your toes again. Schedule your private session with relationship expert Stacey Bartley at staceybartley.com/checkup.
Seattle, Tacoma, Antwerp. That's right. We're streamed worldwide on our app and on the web at 1150kknw.com.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about business success versus love for a lifetime. The fight is on. The rink is set. Which one should we sacrifice in order to have what we want and desire and deserve in life? I hope that the answer for you is neither. Now, I know that seems crazy, especially because of the things that we're taught. Sometimes we feel like we need to negotiate success with our money and our business because we feel like something's got to give, right? So we start sacrificing the people who matter most to us. The truth is very often, our relationships take a back seat, especially if we have an entrepreneur in the house, because all of the energy, all the time, all the focus gets funneled into the business success. Now, in the triad of life, right, we have money that sits at the top, we have health that's right, a close second, and our relationships sitting third. And unfortunately, we treat our relationships oftentimes in our pursuit of those other two areas in our lives as though it's always going to be there to support us. It seems to be the thing we can sacrifice first, especially if we are in love, because if we're in love, we expect that person to kind of hang in there with us, right? See us through, cheer us on. And when we don't focus any time and effort and energy on it, we find that we're kind of ticked off when it doesn't happen like that. We reach back for that relationship and it's not necessarily there for us. Now, here's the thing. Relationships have and operate on the same universal principles as the other two areas in our life. We also tend to carve it off as though it sits in this container where these principles do not apply. And we need to start telling the truth here where that is certainly not the case. And it's possible. I just want to paint this picture for you. It is possible to create balance so that we don't have to sacrifice our money, we don't have to sacrifice our health, and we don't have to sacrifice our relationships to live a life that we love and deserve. And we have Trevor Blake in the house here today to help us learn how to do just that. So before we let Trevor say hello, we want to give him a proper and a formal introduction so you can understand why it is we are so excited to have him on our show and give him the respect and the kudos that he deserves for what he has accomplished and continues to do in his own personal life. Trevor loves writing. He's building profitable businesses, and his love of writing has led him to become a New York Times bestseller 2 times. The first book is 3 Simple Steps, which that's how Tom and I came into his world back in about 2013 or 2014. We were inspired by that book and ended up connecting with Trevor then. He also has a second book that he's just released, yes, in the middle of a pandemic. And it's doing fabulous, I think. Trevor, I can't wait to have you talk more about that with us. The title of his second book is Secrets to a Successful Startup. His genius of building businesses has led him to build and sell 3 companies for $600 million from home and without employees, utilizing a very unique business model. Trevor is currently negotiating the sale, I understand, of his 4th while building businesses 5, 6, and 7. By the way, that's not all. Hold on. Bachelor of Science in Radiation Physics and Nuclear Medicine, along with an MBA. He's also a successful screenplay writer, and somehow he fits in being an animal welfare and activist. But hold on. Remember I said that thing about the relationship, about the wife, right? He's been married for 36 years, happily, he says. So, gosh, I just have to ask you, Trevor, do you keep her in the basement? Does she just come out and play when you don't have anything else to do?
No, it's the opposite way around. You keep me in the basement.
There you go. There you go.
Well, we want to welcome you to the show. And Trevor, Tom and I, as I had said, had connected with you a few years back. And we were so impressed when we joined your...
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Navigating the silent, complex moments of separation or your partner's need for space can feel like walking through a maze without a map. If this sounds familiar, know that you are not alone. This journey, filled with uncertainties and introspection, requires a gentle, understanding guide. Hey, I'm Brooke from Love Shack Live. We see you, and more importantly, we get it. That's why we created the Separation Support Bundle. A collection of resources designed to not just guide you through separation, but to offer comfort and clarity during these times. Our separation guide offers insights and support to help make sense of your emotions and the process of separation, And for those moments when words escape you, our guide on 10 texts to send when navigating space provides thoughtful prompts to help communicate with compassion, plus a soothing separation meditation to help ease the overwhelming moments. Because sometimes all we need is a starting point, or a way to start feeling okay again. Remember, you don't have to journey through these complexities of separation alone. Our separation support bundle is here to accompany you, guiding you towards healing, understanding, and most importantly, the renewed sense of self. Visit stacybartley.com/bundle today to access your free separation support bundle. At Love Shack Live, we're all about exploring the real stuff that relationships bring, the good and the challenging. So let's tackle this together, because even in the hardest times, there's hope, growth, and yes, even love to be found.
The physics of success was the very first course I believe that you taught in this, and we were great, blessed and grateful to participate in that. And we were so impressed by how much time, and you spent an hour, I think, with all of us individually, all of us that were part of that very first group that came through, and that was very powerful.
And that was a life-changing moment for us. And I remember you saying, well, Tom and Stacy, you have your awe. Where you're going to struggle with your 8 kids and 12 grandkids and everything going on is flow. And you are absolutely spot on. So let's jump into, I would love to hear your thoughts on, how do you create and do so much in life, right? You're very accomplished. You're continuing to do so much. And by the way, we haven't even let on that you encourage people to do a 5-hour workday. So... Right. Because I know you and I'm part of your guild, and we've had the pleasure of participating and being blessed by your work and what you teach and what you share. This radio station is actually one of those things. Very serendipitous how it came, the work of Gus. How do you find the balance? What are some keys that you can share with us today in our conversation that will help us begin to know what are the principles that you teach? Why are they so powerful? And how does it create the balance that we deserve and need right now when things are like, crazy?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, Stacey and Tom. I appreciate it. Anything called Love Shack is in my bailiwick, because I'm from the 80s. It's my era. So everywhere I go, I find the 80s having sort of some kind of revival. So I'm a happy man. When you do an introduction like that, I'm left here. I'm sort of listening to it. I'm thinking, I'd like to meet this person. And then when you describe it, it takes a long time to describe. It sounds busy, right? It sounds like it's a heck of a lot. But from my perspective, it doesn't feel like that. If anything, at the moment, I'm a little bit bored, to be honest and truthful with you. So I'm looking to start some other things at the time. And the basis of the balance comes from getting things right at the very beginning. And I think what you mentioned it before, the typical story of an entrepreneur is they start their company and then they immediately start with a huge amount of guilt and fear, because they think, oh my God, I've put myself out there. I've told my partner that I've put myself out there. My friends, my family know I'm out there. I'd better not fail. That's a huge amount of stress. So I've got to work 20 hours a day. And I can't afford to fail. And so it becomes at the expense of everything else. I do know a lot of successful entrepreneurs who work 16-hour days, but they're on their 3rd marriage. They're taking antidepressants, and even the dog doesn't know who they are. So yes. I've never wanted that for my life. So like all things in life, necessity is a mother of invention. I found different ways of doing things so I can maintain the balance, and that's the message I'm trying to share with everybody: success with balance. Because I actually find it's never a mutual exclusive thing. It's not an either or. I find that balancing like that way, that everything benefits everything else. So you mentioned my writing. So when I'm writing, I find that improves my communication as a businessman. So I'm able to write much sharper reports, much better abstracts, because I'm in the cancer research and development field at the moment, primarily. And I find that benefits that. And then when I'm as a businessman, of course, I meet all kinds of amazing characters, and they sort of fuel my writing, if you like. So I find things work together. I often get people who join the guild, like you mentioned our guild. People join the guild and they say, I'm doing this, but I'd really like to do that. And they've got this mentality of it's either or. And it never should be like that, because if we go back far enough in time, if we go back before the Industrial Revolution, before people became slaves to the machine, people did many different things at the same time, and their priorities were always family, spirit, leisure, work, in that order. And they worked in order to fund the rest of their lifestyle. It was a village-centric culture. And then the Industrial Revolution just destroyed all of that. And I think we're still sort of caught up in that. Well, I'm basically a lazy person, so I never wanted to work 9 hours a day or 8 hours a day. It's just not my style. So I found other ways of doing things, and I find that having that balance, in America, really the priority is work, 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 work. And it's the same as in Britain now, actually. It wasn't when I grew up there, but it is now. Work, 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 and everything else at the expense of success in that endeavor. And I just don't find that a very fun way to work at all. And I don't think I'd have been successful with my businesses if I'd gone with that approach. So I decided that I was starting my company, my first company, and I thought, but I don't want to work 16 hours a day. So I found a structure that just worked for its time. It's kind of an idea whose time has come now, actually. And you're seeing a lot of the old hierarchical structured businesses that are based on this sort of linear masculine energy are crumbling down, and newer sort of faster paced, rapidly changing companies are taking their place. And when you're in that situation, you can't afford to have a hierarchy and, armies of junior management and that sort of thing. It's basically the structures become really flat. And so I use an outsourced structure. So it takes about 6 months to set up, and then it runs itself. And I really have very little to do. And I've had to change my style as a businessman from being a supervisor who's a bit of a pain in the ass because he keeps asking for updates, to being a guy who trusts everybody and stays out of the way and lets the thing run itself. And when that happens, the first time I did it back in the sort of 2002, 2003, I was terrified of going on vacation in case something went wrong. But I went to England for 3 weeks. And in those days, the cell phones were like the size of bricks, so they didn't. I wasn't able to call home every 5 seconds, call back to America where the company was based. And when I got back from America, I was thinking, I must have 1,000 emails. People must be panicking. The thing must have fallen apart. And when I got to my computer, I probably had about 3, work-related emails. They hadn't even noticed I'd gone. And I suddenly realized that this is a really interesting way of building companies. So that's successful. So I started a second one and a third one and a fourth. And as you say, I sell them when they get to a certain size because that's just my personality. I like to build. I'm not a maintainer. And I just keep building companies, and it's a lot of fun. But there's at no point in my life could I possibly think of a day where I get up and go to work. My day starts with getting up, making my wife a cup of tea. And then we sit down and we have a chat and we talk about our dreams and whether we slept well and all that kind of thing. And I don't go near an electronic device until at least 9 o'clock. And even then I do other things before I will check emails and stuff like that. So it requires a certain amount of discipline. And then I structure my day into I call it a 5-hour work day. Scientifically, it's shown that the brain can't concentrate for more than 2 hours. We kid ourselves into thinking we get into the zone. I do this when I'm writing. I'll write for say 5 hours, and then the next day I'll read it and I'll keep the first 2 hours and throw the other 3 hours away.
Wow.
And so I've learned, 2 hours, stop. And it doesn't matter what's going on, stop. And then go and do something completely different for 2 hours. I take my dogs for a walk, or I'll have lunch with my wife for a 2-hour lunch or something like that. And it's in those relaxation periods where the magic happens. You get those aha moments where you smack yourself on the forehead and you say, why didn't I think of that 3 weeks ago? All of that. So balancing like that, you get the perfect connection between analytical work and intuitive work. And I find that makes the magic of successful companies. And it's not like 7 successful companies having tried 15 times, and it's 7 for 7. And I think that obviously there's a message there. But if it's working like that, and other people I've coached, as you know from the Guild, other people I've coached, gone on to have even better success than I've had. This system, this idea, this balance really does work in life. And I couldn't imagine my life without my first thought every day being the welfare of my wife. That's the first thing I think about, and the last thing I think about. If that was threatened, then work would be the first thing I would sacrifice. And I think it's just an attitude more than, I think that just helps, get the balance right.
You mentioned a couple of times intuitive, which I would really like to talk more into. And this idea of universal principles, right? They apply to life, not as just business or money, but they also apply to love, right? They apply to everything. So we have a teaching in our work, and I think that's what makes us really unique. We try everything we can to take the etherical, emotional aspects of relationships, and we put them into some tactile, concrete principles around the universe, so we can understand how relationships really work, how we create them, right? And then how is it we develop the behaviors and the practices to, yes, create balance, but to also be able to navigate through anything that might come. Right? And I can't do it when I'm a hot mess and I'm overworking and I'm tired and I'm stressed. So one of the first things we teach people to do is sit your butt down and get clear about the emotional, we call it the emotional cookie, because I need to decide, the emotional cookie is the emotion I'm feeling in my body, right? But then we need to break it apart. I need to digest it. I need to break it down. Is there some chocolate chips in there? Is there some brown sugar and a little coconut and maybe a smash of salt? Meaning, okay, I cannot move forward with any kind of semblance of balance without connecting with my intuition. So where I'm going here is I would love for you, if you would, share with our audience the principles that you teach and the foundational core of 3 simple steps so that they can start to see how to prep themselves, because you'd mentioned it all starts in the beginning and how you set it up. And I love that, because I could not agree more. We don't set it up right. We find ourselves in the middle of a, I can't say this word on air, but a show. And
it's hard to unknot. Once it's knotted, it's really hard to unknot. It's like when you go and get your Christmas decorations and you thought you put them away really carefully, and then it's just one big knot at Christmas. You may as well throw it out and start again at that point. Because it doesn't matter what you do, they're not going to work. So I think as a relationship and businesses are like that a little bit. So getting it right in the beginning. So that's why I wrote Secrets to a Successful Startup, because I meet so many entrepreneurs who don't get it right at the beginning, and they're always playing catch up, and it's really stressful. It's really hard. So if you take the time to get it right in the beginning, and you also, so I talk a lot about meditation and intuition, and these days, hard-nosed businessmen, well, I consider myself one, have come out of the closet and admitted, you know what, I get all my best ideas from meditation. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they might have been afraid to come out and say that because they would have been laughed at. But now they're all saying it. Now it's cool. Okay, so now everyone's saying, "Oh, I meditate as well," where they wouldn't have done it before. And it's so important to do that. So it's you in meditation, you put yourself in a place where you're able to receive inspiration and ideas. And then if you start to work on your intuition, I would rather have a moment of insight than 20 years of experience. It's just, those moments of insight, they save you all that effort and all that work. So if you can put yourself in a position right at the beginning, in any aspect of life, relationship or hobby or play or parenthood or marriage, whatever, or relationships, whatever it may be, if you put yourself in that place where you are communicating with your inner self in some way, and then you're learning to deepen your intuition, then you're always going to be better off. It's going to be a better experience and a more joyful experience, I think, anyway. But I learned intuition through my mother primarily, and then through my wife. So, the story in 3 Simple Steps starts. It's 3 simple steps. There's mentality control. There's deepening our intuition and connection through nature, so that we learn to get this deeper power within ourselves. And then the third part is directing all of that power at something. So you set yourself some kind of target and you go for it, like you've done here with this show, and it becomes magical. The whole process becomes magical. And so the same thing happens in relation. So my mother was given 6 months to live when I was only sort of 7, and she just knew that wasn't right. I mean, in those days we didn't have a car, and we couldn't afford babysitters. Actually, I don't think babysitters even existed as a concept back then. And so when she went to the doctor, we all went. 3 kids, the husband went along too, and they put the 3 kids in the corridor, but the walls were so thin we could hear the conversation between her and the doctor. And I remember when the doctor said, you need to get your affairs in order, which is the polite British way of saying, you're going to die in a few months. And I had that said to me. My wife's had it said to her 3 times in her life, and every time it's been said, because of the connection to intuition. I remember my mother saying, "Young man, you've got that wrong. I'll decide when I die." And I remember how powerful that was to me. But I also was inspired by her intuition, because whenever I talked to her, and we weren't allowed to talk about cancer in those days, but we'd talk around it, kind of thing. And whenever she and I talked around it, I could see it in her eyes. She just knew she wasn't going anywhere. And that sort of, I was fascinated by, how do you know? How do you know this, And so she introduced me to my wife. My wife was her chemotherapy nurse, and I was in the Royal Navy. I took some compassionate leave, and I was wheeling my mother in the wheelchair through the chemotherapy ward, and then this apparition came out of a side door, and it was my wife, and I fell madly in love. She took a little longer to fall in love with me, and after she ran out of excuses after the 3rd time I asked her to marry me. And finally she married me. So I just knew. So what is that thing about I just knew? I saw her and I knew. And I felt a little pull in the solar plexus. What is that? And I was fascinated by it. So I've gone on a lifetime of discovery of what is intuition and how do we deepen it and how do we get more connection to it. And thank goodness I did, because it's helped me to spot opportunities and also be aware of issues or challenges or threats before they become those things. And it saved me so many times. It's particularly useful as an entrepreneur. I'd much rather have that pull in my solar plexus that warns me that the decision I was about to make is the wrong one than go through the bad decision and have to try and unravel that later. It's so expensive and stressful. So the intuition part of it, I've been fascinated by. I have to say, though, despite what I teach in the Guild, despite what I teach on my course, Transformation, which the physics of success you mentioned before has now become transformation. It's sort of evolved into another level, as all good things in life, as all energy does. After all of that teaching and all of that quote unquote expertise, I probably still only have 10% of the average woman's intuition. and I would give anything to have 20%, because I'd be a multi-billionaire, and if I could bottle it and sell it, my goodness, I'd be the richest man on earth. So for men like me, it's a struggle. You have to work at it. You've got to work. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to have a habit to deliberately work on your intuition, and it'll help you in every aspect of your life. With wonderful people, like I keep calling my wife, it sounds so cold, so Lynn. So with wonderful people like Lynn, I just have to observe. I just have to watch. And the number of times that I've said, "What do you think about this?" And she said, "Oh, don't work with him. He's not good for you." And I said, I get so indignant. How on earth do you know that? You've never met him. I've been working with him for years. I like the guy. You have no right to say that about someone you've never met. And she's always right. And the couple of times I've gone against her intuition, it's cost me stress, energy, but also financially. And so, like typical men, we don't learn the lesson immediately. It takes a few years. so several decades later, I'm finally getting it.
Yeah, it reminds me, Tom and I are together because of intuition. I was a 14-year-old girl, and my sister was getting married, and I was crazy mad in the house. And so I decided to find a place of solace out on the front porch of my house and take in some sunshine before the ceremony started. As I'm sitting out on the front porch, my soon-to-be brother-in-law comes running around the house to greet his carload of friends who had just come in from the East Coast. This was all taking place in Utah. And as the doors start opening up in the car, out jumps this beautiful, handsome young man with a big, bold smile and a huge afro. And I remember sitting on the porch, having no idea about relationships or love, and going, ooh, I want a guy like that someday, right? And off and on it went. I ended up pregnant at 17. Right. And I ended up having to get married to my high school boyfriend. But the whole time in the back of my mind was this experience as a 14-year-old girl. Remember that guy that jumped out of the back of that car. For 35 years, I never met him. I have journal entries that say, gosh, if I could just find somebody like Tom, as I went through the ups and downs of, another marriage and 5 more children, and thinking, oh, I'm just horrible at this whole love thing, man. I can't figure this out. And only to have my brother-in-law 35 years later call me and say, hey, you're quite connected, with economic development in the state of Utah, and Utah with some entrepreneurial pursuits that I was having at the time. I don't know who to connect my friend to, but do you mind if my friend, you don't know him, from California, gave you a call? Now, that conversation had happened hundreds, if not thousands of times between my sister and my brother-in-law and I. They would always say, you don't know my friend Tom, who lives in California. But then, my antennas would go up and I go, well, tell me about Tom right now. Oh, he's getting married. He's starting a business. And so I was tracking him the whole time. And the minute,
that was like stalking, actually, Tom.
Well, I was going to say, Trevor, she's been stalking me for 32 years. It's like, man, no, I mean, it's
the afro.
Yes.
What happened to
yes.
it?
Trevor can see me. For those of you that can't, I'm kind of the Charles Barkley look now, and my last name is Bartley. Go figure. So just missed it, but yeah. So no, it's really I would say it's a wonderful story.
In a million years he would actually be my husband. It was just, and you wonder, how did I know that as a 14-year-old girl? How did that all come to be, right? And you can't predict it. You can't line it up. It doesn't make any sense, right?
Well, it does. That's the key thing. It does, and that's so because I come from sorry to cut you off, but I think it's a point your listeners.
Yeah, no. Please share.
Because it all sounds kind of magical and new age when we talk like this, but we talk because we're excited, right? We feel lucky. I feel blessed. Okay, so I'm sure you both feel the same way. Yes. But that doesn't mean that life's been a single line from birth to death, and without any trauma along the way. My wife's physically died twice since we've been together. I'm a cancer survivor. She's a cancer survivor. It's not without trauma, but because of that intuition, you seem to, because you know you're right for each other, you seem to be able to ride through those things, and I find they make us stronger and bring us kind of closer together. But being a scientist, by sort of mentally a scientist, I suppose, I'm always looking for evidence for things. So I'm always looking for evidence for intuition, and also evidence is, how do we know? And so I'm really into quantum physics, and this is one of the things I teach in the course Transformation. And now we know, so 10 years ago, we thought we knew and we hoped it was true, and so you couldn't really teach about it. Now we know that everything in life is connected by a new discovery discovered and actually confirmed in 2012 called the Higgs field. So previously there was a bit of an argument. Is there space between everything, or is everything connected by something? And that something we now know is called the Higgs field. It's a field of energy. And the way to think about it visually, I'm a sort of a visual thinker, so the way, hence the screenplays, I guess. So the way to think of it visually is like cosmic glue. So without the Higgs field, we'd shoot through the universe. All three of us now, we wouldn't have time to talk because that's physical. We'd shoot through the universe at the speed of light, nothing more than fermions and bosons, little particles. But because of the Higgs field, which is cosmic glue, our interaction with that slows us down. And that's where we start to get and feel connectivity. We start to feel physicality and materialism. And that's the life we live as a human being. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful image, but it's science. It's lovely. If I'd said this 20 years ago, I'd have been labeled a new age quack or something. But no, this is true. This is physics. And why that's important is because now we know that everything's connected by this Higgs field. If you understand your interaction with energy, and you change the way you interact with energy, then you can connect through the Higgs field and change everything. Now, women do this automatically, maybe not every woman, but I find women generally, which is exactly what you're talking about, Stacey. You've done this naturally because you know because you're connected. So you've always been connected to Tom. But Tom, being a man, maybe not having the same level of connectivity or depth of connectivity, not being aware of the Higgs field, might not have been able to receive that information. And one of the secrets to success in all aspects of life is understanding that communication, the transmission and the reception through the Higgs field. Once you know that, and you learn a few very simple tools and techniques, and you actually, you use your imagination, and you use a few sort of, what would I call it? Well, they are tricks, tools, they're little tricks. And so, and you connect through nature, and you go through this Higgs field, you can connect with anybody, anyone you want, anytime you want. And the beauty of that is, because time's an illusion, you can go forward in time and back in time. And that opens up all kinds of philosophical conversations, but also all kinds of magic. So now we know it's a real thing. What you experienced over all of that time was a real journey through the Higgs field. But you wouldn't have been able to write it on a piece of paper because you didn't have the evidence or the information. And so I mentioned that because I think if you have a lot of listeners, they might think, that Trevor guy, he's a lucky guy finding her, and that Stacey girl, she's a lucky girl finding this Tom, but you don't find by chance, you find by deliberate connection. And women are so much stronger and better at this than we are, than men are. Men, don't worry, don't panic. If you learn these tools and techniques, if you learn these tools and techniques, you can do it too. And when my wife does it, she just shrugs her, when Lynn does it, she shrugs her shoulders and say, well, yeah, so what? When I do it, I want to celebrate with a glass of wine. It's a major achievement for me. And so, but it is a physics, scientific approach. And if you learn that, then you can completely change the outcomes of your life in any aspect. Obviously, we're talking about relationships here, but it could be in any aspect of life.
Mm-hmm. And it so applies to relationships, because that imagination of where you think you're going to go, I always say, you show up as good as you feel, right? Because of the energy that you're holding and keeping inside of your body. And so if I'm feeling like it's funny when we first come into relationships, if you're talking to somebody who's falling madly in love, right? You probably find this with like business owners who are creating a new business. We talk about all the reasons why it's going to work and all the wonderful things about it and how well it's going to go and what it's going to do for me. And we try and convince and enroll everybody around us, don't we?
Right.
What a fantastic idea this is, right? Until things start to go to hell in a handbasket. And then we start acquiring firing a story, a different narrative, right? The imaging starts to change, the energy starts to change. And now I'm trying to convince people why it's not a good idea and why this isn't going to work, and, you know, how they're messing it up. Those are the people that show up in our office, right? Do you know what they're doing? Do you know how awful this is? Do you know what he's done or she's done now? And they want to tell me the story. And I say, I don't care how you got here. The circumstances are irrelevant. How you emotionally feel about this is everything.
Right.
So why don't we talk about that? Let's talk about where you want to go, because if we start talking about where you don't want to go, guess what's going to pick up momentum?
Well, and that's how energy works. And so you're spot on, Stacey, because energy, you know, so everything. So we know from string theory, which is like a subpart of quantum physics, fascinating study. We know that everything's made up of these jiggling strings of energy. That's the most beautiful phrase I can imagine. We don't need to learn the terms and things for physics. It's jiggling strings of energy, and how fast they jiggle determines what we perceive them as. Okay. So even the desk I'm sat at here, you know, that's as alive and jiggling as the trees behind me through the window that you can see. And so we know all of that. So that's a fantastic thing to kind of hold to ourselves. Because of string theory, it tells us many different things, and it tells us, first of all, in order for anything to survive, it has to exist in at least 10 dimensions, and we only know 3. We only know our current dimensions, right? Mm-hmm. And so knowing that, if you change the way that you interact with energy, that you can change the way that you physically and emotionally deal with this life, what we call life here, you can deal with it differently once you understand the sort of little scientific parameters around it. You just change the way you think and change the way you react. So you can, by doing that, then you change the outcome in the future. You don't need to think of the future. You don't need to think of the past. You just need to change something right now, right here. Just change the way you're talking and the way you're thinking. Because one of the laws of energy is that it can neither be created nor destroyed, only converted into its other form. And so if you have these thoughts of, oh my God, I'm so against what he did, I'm so against what she did, those thoughts go out into the world. They have no choice but to convert and come back, and they give you more of the same experience, because thoughts don't have an emotion. They just are thoughts that become material. And so the more you think about what you don't have or what's wrong, the more you get in your life what you don't have, and more wrong comes to you. And it's really simple, but it's hard to do, isn't it? It's hard to stop. It's hard to change the way we think and talk. But if you learn to do that, and we don't have to become saints, you just have to do it every now and again. If you stop yourself and say, hang on a sec, that thought isn't going to be in my best interest, I'll change it. I use the example of debt because everyone knows debt. So, you know, when you get if you're online and you go into your account and you see the debt and you go, oh my God, how do I make such a mess? How am I going to get out of this? All that's going to happen from those thoughts is you get more debt. So what you have to do is stop and say, okay, those thoughts have hurt me. I didn't mean that. Okay, I'm going to imagine now a day when I'm debt free, and I'm going to walk to the liquor store. I imagine myself doing it. I'm feeling the breeze. I'm opening the door. It's creaking open. I can hear the little bell on the door. I go and get a bottle of champagne, and I pay for it with cash. And I go home and celebrate the fact that I'm debt free. And you have that little thought and that little thing, and then you get more of that. And it sounds all new agey, but I kind of teach this in transformation. And I got an email a couple of weeks ago from someone said, and they always put this in capital letters when they send me this type of email. And he wrote to me and said, for the first time, capital letters, in decades, I am debt free. Wow. And he said it happened miraculously. I had no idea how it was going to happen, but money started turning up from everywhere. He said and then suddenly I'm debt free. And it's all because he changed what he was saying and thinking. And those thoughts go out to the universe and they convert to the material equivalent. So you know, you're hitting on something that's absolutely critical, because most people would say, you know, most people feel that they're in this downward spiral, and the harder they try to get out, the harder they get stuck. The more they get stuck, I call it quicksand. And that's because we don't understand the power of our thoughts and words. I mean, they're like magical bullets. And we've not been taught this in school or taught this in business or in the workplace or anything like that. So once you learn that, this is in 3 simple steps, as you both know, but once you learn that, then you just become a little bit more cautious about the things you say and do. And so instead of being against your partner or against the business or against this, you start to be for its resolution. And then miracles just start happening. I mean, they happen all the time. And I'm saying this like, okay, I must be perfect. The only reason I'm telling people this is because there's no one on earth who needs this advice more than me. Because left alone without these tools and techniques, I've got more hang-ups than almost anybody that's listening to this program.
Yeah, that's what Tom and I say as well. The reason why we teach relationships, and universal principles is because we need them, because we don't want to get too far away from them. So, right.
And Trevor, let me ask. So I love your the clarity of what you're sharing and how fast we can change. So, I know you love to share with us in the Guild that you love to take walks. So, is that the practice that you use to get this visceral change to where your energy quickly shifts? I mean, because obviously, excuse me, I know we can do it logically, but what is it that you do that you can really start to change and you're feeling, it's visceral, right? I mean, that's really what you want, right?
Well, and it is a real physical connection. Okay, so energy, everything's connected. So because everything's energy and everything's connected through the Higgs field. So I like to go to where I think there's the most connections. So I will go to an ocean, because you can't get anything more connected than an ocean, or into a forest, because every tree is connected to every tree through a mushroom conduit. I don't know if your listeners may know this as well, but every root of every tree is connected to every root of every other tree through this special type of fungus. And so, if one tree gets a parasite, it sends a message through this fungus to all the other trees saying, change the texture of your leaves so you don't get the parasite. I mean, nature's constantly communicating. So I always felt, and I didn't make this up myself. I grew up suffering from what today, I didn't think of it in these terms back then, but what today we'd call sectarian bullying. Okay, and so and it was serious stuff. It was the equivalent of cricket bats, like your baseball bats, but cricket bats and a 12-bore shotgun. So this wasn't something. It wasn't name calling, and it wasn't something that I could always fight back against, because I was 12 to 14 years old, and these guys were in their 20s. And so they chased me through town because I was English, and they hated the English, and they wanted the English out of their province. This is back in the 70s. And I used to hide in the town library, because they were too stupid to even think of going into a library. They'd probably never read a book in their lives. And so I felt safe in there. And at the back of the library was a reference section. You weren't allowed to withdraw books in the reference section. And I could hide in there because it was an old prison. It had a big steel door and a converted prison. And so I would hide in the back, and I just started reading. And by chance, I just was at the B aisle. And I just started reading, by chance, biographies. And I just became addicted to them. I'm still addicted to them. And so I read over a period of 2 or 3 years, I read on a Saturday and Sunday when I was in town, because my mother was working in the shop and I was supposed to be to go and help her and walk her home. And so I read every single biography, and I noticed the 3 simple steps as the 3 patterns of behavior that I noticed in all of those heroes. And it didn't matter whether they were adventurers or industrialists or artists and musicians. It really didn't matter. And it didn't matter whether they were 20th century or whether they were 16th century. The same patterns of behavior. And so I decided to adopt them into my life. One was mentality control. So it was the ability to take on criticism. And second was this connectivity, the ability to get away far from the madding crowd, as my favorite writer, Thomas Hardy, would call it, and out into nature. And they all did it, from Samuel Coates, Henry Ford, Madam C.J. Walker. They all got away from the madness and found tranquility and peace in nature, and they'd sit under a tree. In fact, Madam C.J. Walker climbed a tree and sat in a tree so no one could find her. And it's in those moments where they had these fantastic solutions, but also found that, I'm part of this. I'm not this horrible person that people see. I'm not this ugly person that they don't want in their town anymore. Madam C.J. Walker, born to slaves, orphaned at 14, abused by her husband, hair falling out because she was malnourished. She became America's first female millionaire. Unbelievable success. But her route to success was getting away from all those people who said, this is who you are, and out into nature, where nature says, you can be the highest person you can possibly wish to be. And that's what I learned. And so I happened to be lucky to live in the countryside. So it was easy for me. And it completely changed my life. I went from being a pretty ordinary student to top student. I went from having no ambition to breaking into the Royal Naval Academy, which was really just for, right honorable sons and princes and all the rest of it. And there was little Trevor Blake from this horrible, awful little town with I had one shirt, one pair of underpants, to my name, because we grew up poor. And there I am in this, with Prince Andrew all of a sudden. That all happened simply because I adopted those patterns of behavior that those fantastic people, those heroes, were good enough to write in their biographies, to pass down to other generations. And, so I wrote 3 simple steps purely because I felt, it worked for me. So if it works for me, it's got to work for everybody else. And that's why I wrote it. But that's what it is. So I find getting out to answer your question, I'm a real rambler when it comes to answering questions. But to answer your question, I find when in my 5-hour workday, 2 hours of work, and then hit the trail with my dogs all by myself and get under a tree and connect. And I don't mind admitting that to the whole world, because I can do it now because I'm a billionaire. Okay, it would have been harder to do it when I was 14, because people would say, well, what's the benefit of that? And I'd say, well, I don't know yet. Right. I'm pretty sure it will benefit me one day. So I can do it now, but I would encourage everybody to do that. You must not just go out to nature with your device and listening. I see people walking around here and they're talking on the telephone and they've missed everything. There's bears walking behind them and they haven't even seen them. They're missing nature completely. To understand nature, you have to immerse in it. Just like I was saying, I think there's an example in 3 Simple Steps. Try and explain to somebody what a bath is like when they've never had a bath by just pointing to a bath and explaining that it's something that you fill with water. You don't get a bath until you get in it and you warm soapy suds and you go, oh, this is a bath. Now you get it. Well, nature's the same. You've got to immerse in it and then you get it. So you go without any devices, without any company, and you just try not to think and just let nature, which is far smarter than any of us, try to communicate with you. And that's really what I've been doing all my life.
No, I like that. I mean, I love that bath analogy, because again, I think that's very powerful for where people you have to get it all over you. Yes. I mean, that's whatever that is for you. For you, it's nature. I mean, so.
I had a mom that was a huge inspiration to me as well. And Tom as well. Our fathers died the same year, ironically. So we both lost our fathers as children and had these incredible mothers who were very intuitive. And in fact, Tom's mom was what did you call her, honey? A healer. She worked a lot with energy back in the 70s when it wasn't even a thing.
Yeah, I had most of my school friends, my young friends thought my mom was off her rocker. She was just simply way ahead of her time,
Yeah.
Well, I work with energy healers. Well, you probably know from the Guild. I don't know if you were there for Marie Manuchehri.
Oh, yes.
So part of that comes because, for many, I've been badly misdiagnosed twice in my life, and it could have cost me my life, and my wife 3 times. Wow. Lynn 3 times, could have cost her life. And so we thought there must be a better way or something more than, just going to, and these were top doctors of mine. We were lucky enough to be able to afford, Harvard and all the rest of it. And so that's what, and then, no sooner had I asked that question and I met someone on the beach who said, oh, I've got this person I go to on a regular basis, name's Lee. And I'm very cynical about these things. And so it takes some convincing. I didn't want to put Lynn in that position first. So I said, I'll go first and check her out. And I went to Lee, and turns out Lee was an energy intuitive and a healer. Well, what an experience. One of the best experiences of my life. I felt I could fly through walls after spending an hour in her company. And so it had a huge impact on me. And so I work, in California and also in the Pacific Northwest, I work with energy healers on a regular basis. And we have a 4-series, the TrevorGBlake.com has a 4-series webinar coming up with Marie Manuchehri over the next.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be there.
I think it starts next week. And if your listeners are interested, you can go to my website, TrevorGBlake.com, and then type in /energy, and you can get a discount on it, I'm told. I don't do any of this. It's the people behind the scenes. They've told me that. And it's amazing. It's eye-opening and mind-blowing that people have this level of connection, like your mother, like Lynn is clairvoyant and clairaudient. They have this level of connection where it's just completely natural. They don't have to work at it. I'm in awe of it, to be honest with you. And I keep trying to get a little bit of it. But
me too. It reminds me of a story of my sister who she's way more intuitive than I am. I have to work at it a little bit, even though I'm female, right? I was raised by, my 3 brothers and these incredible women in my life, but tend to take on some of the male mentality roles in my own life. But having said that, she was diagnosed with colon cancer here about 14 and a half years ago, and had that same conversation of, hey, guess what? It's not going to be so well. You probably ought to wrap up your affairs. And she had a 9-year-old daughter at the time. And I remember her saying to Alex, as she looked in her eyes, I'm going to be here to see you get married. And I'm going to be here to see you with your grandkid or my grandkids and your babies. And so she's going in for, I don't know, maybe the 10th surgery. They had to move her ileostomy bag from one side of her body to the other. You're going to love this. she gets a call from the nurse and says, it's imperative that you get in here today in order for us to mark on your body where it is we're going to put this bag, right? And my sister said, oh, no. I'll tell you what's imperative. It's imperative that I get my nails done and that I get my hair done. I'm going to buy myself a new pajama outfit and a fancy glass to put my water and all that stuff you guys are going to be making me drink. I guess what? You're going to figure out where to put it. So we'll just go ahead and see you tomorrow. You got this handled. And she did. That's exactly what she did. She has learned to call the shots in her own life in regards to what she feels like she needs to do for herself and her own well-being, in spite of, right? And not that she's not open to taking advice, but very, very intuitive that way, where she's saying, oh, I'm going to be around. We're not going anywhere.
Well, yeah, they don't know what to do with her. I mean, she's at a place where they said, Stephanie, we don't know what to do with you because there's no one that's done what you've done, you know? So
I love stories like that. It's for me, it's the meaning of indefatigable. Just, you just know, and you will not give in, because we have a right. No one has a right to tell us when we're going to go. It's our decision.
So Trevor, let me ask if you could share with us, how about, let's say, we have a lot of children, and one of our daughters actually works with us. She's behind the scenes now as we speak. With all the doom and gloom, you've talked a lot about this in Guild. You've shared with us, you feel like we're at this convergence of place here. What could you share, instead of putting our head in the sand and think there's no hope, especially for, say, younger people? Do we have a future? Is it really are we ever going to be able to live our dreams? What could you share with all the place where you sit on your side of physics and knowing that might give them a spark of hope as we finish up our show today?
Yeah, one of the funny things is, because I remember back to my teenage years when it was all doom and gloom, 3-day week in England. We were told that Britain would freeze over by the next 5 years and look like Siberia and all that nonsense and stuff like that. But the funny thing is, as much our parents worried, just like you're speaking now, parents worried about how are our kids going to take this? Is it going to scar them for life? We loved it, because it was a change from routine, and it was something to talk about, and it was something we remember forever. And I now talk nostalgically about those, what they call dark days, because they were the best days of my life, because we behaved like a family instead of all being in 5 different places at the same time. So I think, the kids that I know, they seem to be having a good time. They don't, unless they watch TV and TV tells them they're not supposed to be having a good time, in which case they'll start to feel depressed and all the rest of it. But, everything passes, everything. I'm up there in age. I just turned 60 last week. So I have been through 8 viruses, 8 pandemics I've been through in my life. I've been through 12 recessions, including 2 very deep recessions. You know what? I'm still here. I don't really remember any of it causing any kind of issues, except, this is different, but we fall fine. Human beings are incredibly adaptable, incredibly smart, and we have the ability to conquer everything. And when I go outside, before COVID-19, I could walk all day and for miles and never see another soul. Today, I walk out and I see families with their bikes, left their devices behind, talking like families, behaving like families, happy to wave and say hello, instead of being in their own little place. I actually think COVID-19 has been a good thing for a lot of families. I have friends who say it's been the best time of their lives because they've spent such quality time with their kids. Whether the kids say the same thing about spending so much time with the parents is debatable. But I don't see the dark doom and gloom as that other people see it, and everything passes. It is true, going back to what you were sort of hinting at, Tom, it is true that so everything is energy. Okay, let's go back to that. So energy moves in waves, and there are all kinds of different cycles. There's small ones, middle ones, long ones. We're in a very long wave that lasted 800 years, back to the 1200s. Back to the time of the Templars, actually. And that was the macho phase, okay? That's what people call masculine energy. It's very linear, it's very slow. Do things like clipboard mentality, one thing at a time. Everything, build runways and freeways and build hierarchical structures for business. Very macho-oriented, very male-dominated. That's now giving away to what people call the feminine energy, which is spiraling and flat and very exhausting. And, technology will change at a pace we can't possibly even imagine today. And we think it's changing fast now. All of that's happening. And that's all this is. This is all part of it. What happens physically in the world with viruses and corporate greed and all the rest of it, which is what's caused the recession, not the virus. But all of that happens. It happens all of the time, all through our lives. And I think this, one of the ways to stay sane is to try and figure out what can I change and what can't I change. There will always be corporate greed. There will always be political grandstanding. There will always be people who try to manipulate viruses and that will escape and cause issues. All of those things will always happen. All you have to do is just love yourself and love those people around you, and it will pass, and you'll be through the other side, and everyone else is hiding behind the sofa, and you'll be stood upright with your eyes wide open. And that's when the opportunities show. That there's never a better time to start something new than in a recession.
And go into that a little bit, Trevor, if you would, because you've said, and I'm sure people challenge you on this, there could not be a better time to start a business right now. Recession is brilliant. I think
history will show there's never been a better time to reinvent yourself, but also never a better time to achieve rapid financial independence through success. And I say that because back in the 50s, the average age of a company was 75 years, and it took ages for it to catch on. Now we're down to under 20 years. In 5 years' time, companies will be 4 or 5 years older. When I started my first company, 2002, I sold it 6 years later for $105.5 million. I started it with $200. And people said, that's amazing. That was so fast. What a story that is. Now that seems incredibly slow. I saw the other day, somebody came up with an idea, Christmas 2017. They sold it in January this year for $500 million. This is the world that we're living in. Okay, so there will never be a better time, and the energy is there for that. So long as you set up right, find a copy of Secrets to a Successful Startup in the library or wherever. All my proceeds go to cancer research and development, so I'm not pushing books and courses. It's just they're there if you need them. And that'll help you start up right. And starting up right means coming up with a winning idea and then converting it into a physical equivalent of that energy. And it's a process. If you get that process right, you have to do very little after that point, except, watch, observe, stay out of the way, and let it take care of itself. And you can achieve incredible success in a short space of time. I don't think that's ever been possible before, at least in the last
in our lifetime, right?
Definitely not in our lifetime, right?
Right.
The old way of doing things was start, and then if you were really good, expand regionally, and if you were brilliant, expand nationally. And it took years and years and years. Now you sit in front of your computer, you can engage the world in a second. That's what's technology. So take advantage of the technology, and you can achieve and do anything you want. Absolutely anything. I'm more excited now at 60 than I was when I was 30.
I agree. Tom and I say all the time, how is it you could possibly be bored right now at this point in time in history?
I don't get it.
I don't understand, right?
Well, and the beautiful thing is again, closing up here, is Trevor is sharing this passionately and all with never sacrificing the first thing. Remember, he said he wakes up in the day is to have a cup of tea with his wife, and that's how he ends his day. So all of this with great difference to it's not either or. I mean, that's the huge thing, and myself included. I've made a lot of sacrifices in my entrepreneur journey with my first wife and my family. So it does not have to be that way.
No, in fact, it's better. It doesn't have to, and we're moving into an era where not only does it not have to be that way, it won't be that way. Right. It won't be that way because we're going back to the village-centric culture. That this new energy makes it possible to have a balanced life, to work from home, to be with your family, to not have to work more than 4 or 5 hours a day. It's not new age. It's where we're at. And you just have to sort of be aware of it. And as soon as you're aware of it, you'll find all kinds of companies and articles and everything will support it. You'll find all kinds of evidence that says, wow, even the big companies are starting to work this way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I think that's fantastic. So any final words to our beautiful entrepreneurs out there, or someone who's kind of out of balance right now, that's trying to support either an entrepreneur in their house or trying to get ahead of their money crisis or sacrificing all that we do in order to be financially free?
Well, right? first, the two things. First of all, don't beat yourself up, because we all make the decisions at the time based upon the information we have. And we all make lousy decisions from time to time. So don't never beat yourself up over it. You just did your best. And one of the techniques is to look in the mirror and say, I did my best with the information I had to hand. You know, I'm okay. And then the second thing is, it's never too late. I have someone on the guild who's 87 years old, just started his first company. Isn't that beautiful? And he feels like a kid. He's never been happy. It's never too late to reinvent yourself. That's the big message.
Well, that's a beautiful way to finish our show. Remember, Trevor G, like generousblake.com is where you can find everything about Trevor. Thank you so much for being on our show, Trevor.
Hey, welcome. This is a blast. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I love it. And, that's one of the things I'm just going to give a shout out here. Recognized and realized that if Trevor Blake is a billionaire, he doesn't need to be here sharing his wisdom with us. So take advantage of it. Pick up his books, get involved. It's great to see you, Trevor. Hope to see you again really soon.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And until we see you next week on Love Shack, we're sending you extraordinary love along with the power to create it today. Have a great week. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.